Okay, welcome back. That was a quick break, I know, but you won't want to miss this next presentation. As I said at the end of that last one, if you were here this morning, then you really were in for a treat. And if you didn't get to see Najmah this morning, then keep an eye out for the change in the agenda. Like I said, Nelly said it is definitely going to be played again. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Naj and take it away.
Hi, thanks so much, Skip. That's such a kind intro. My name is Najmah Salam. You can call me Naj, and I'm here to talk about the essentials of email marketing in the third sector. So I used to work at Health Heroes, which was the one of the leading UK charities that supports wounded veterans and their families. So this is a huge passion of mine. So let's get straight into it. So when we talk about the third sector, we are talking about nonprofit and voluntary organizations. So in smart people speak, this typically refers to the set of institutions and organizations between the state, the first sector, and the market, the second sector. And I imagine a lot of you are in the second sector. So what we're going to cover today is content, cadence, data management, and automations. Before we get into the some of you might be asking, is marketing in the third sector different to the private sector? Well, yes, but actually no, or in third speak, it's yar, but actually nar, just to translate for the pirates out there. There's obviously going to be lots of similarities and differences that are happening behind the scenes. From the perspective of an email marketer, I personally found after many, many years in the private sector and then hopping over to the third sector, that there were two main differences, which was subscribers and content. So subscribers are not customers, they're supporters. This took me a little while to get the hang of at the beginning. But think of it like you're speaking to a board member rather than a shopper or a lead or a customer, like I said, because there's much more about somebody being invested and you convincing them that you're doing everything you can to fulfill your mission statement, your promise, your fulfillment. So attention needs to be paid to accountability. Accountability should be everywhere in any organization, but it's much more the case in charities because lots of people question where the money is going to, all of that stuff. So of course, supporters will usually have a personal connection to the cause as well. So it's no surprise that a lot of the supporters for Help for Heroes were often had connections to the military. Now, when it comes to content, there is bigger emphasis on content marketing for reasons I will cover later. So your tenets of, are you educating? Are you inspiring? Are you entertaining? You really have to be that front of mind. You have to keep donors invested and updated. So going back to my point, like your subscribers are not customers, or your supporters, you have to think of them like a member. That's very much part of it. And also, are the emails embodying the cause? Is everything an extension of your mission statement? So, content. Like any good marketer, if you're in the third sector or in your private sector, this is a question you ask yourself, right? Who are your competitors? In the private sector, you say, all right, yep, there are companies out there that are delivering kind of the same goods or services that we are to the same people. We are fighting for the same people. Pretty normal. But I found that for the charity that I was working in, it became much more about, there are charities that have a very similar mission statement to us, but we were also competing against, just about anything that would stop supporters supporting us. So, somebody wants to buy a new pair of jeans, that's probably going to take money away from you and your cause. A pandemic comes around, hey, that's a huge threat. So this is the case for a lot of charities, of course, but much more so in the last year. The other question is, what can you offer the subscriber? So in the private sector, somebody gives you money, you're able to give them something back in return, right? That's sort of the whole basis of business. You have a good or a service that you can offer in return for money. Not so the case for third sector. Somebody donates, gives the support. There's not a lot you can give back. So this really comes down to the point, which is content is king. I believe this with my whole heart. Content really is. So for charities, there's lack of mutual exchange, like I said. So you have to think about, well, what can you do to make it a really value-added relationship? Have an emphasis on unified content. So what worked best at Help for Heroes was that we would have a message house that is distributed across the organization. So the branding or the content team, some people have one or the other of, they would put together a message house, which is a document that has all of the imagery and the messaging that was appropriate for that point in time, say a big campaign. This would then be distributed across the whole organization, and it made things really easy for marketers across the organization to use that and to have it bleed out into the things that they were putting out. So whether you were a marketer that was working in volunteer recruitment or you were a marketer in fundraising, you could be sure that the messaging was always consistent. And secondly, your content creators are your BFFs, your best friends forever. I mean, seriously, buy your copywriters and designers a coffee. So I was lucky enough to be able to work with a copywriter who would just, work her magic. She would give stuff to me. I could really focus on building the email. That's not the case anymore, and it's rough. So if you are your own designer and copywriter as well, I empathize. Find ways to gather user-generated content as well. This is going to be like gold for your content in your emails. Do try to put together so you can really easily get that content in. So, things like supporter beneficiary stories are really going to form the backbone of a lot of your storytelling. And of course, find ways to show, not tell. You need to obviously you need to repeat certain things, but you don't have to hammer people in the head with it. There's different ways to show and not tell. So you can present easy to understand data. You can do things like bring in the human element, and you can be thematically consistent. So bring in the human element goes back to user-generated content. You can find some really nice, authentic ways of bringing in the content. Being thematically consistent goes back to my first point, which is having a message house. So these were 3 different emails I built for Help for Heroes. Strong visuals do make a difference, like it or not. And my point is, imagery doesn't always equate to expensive photography. So we do have some professional photography here, which you can see on the left. But you can see that on the far right, we have one of our veterans, Kelly, who I'm pretty sure this picture was taken on a phone. And is it the most professionally taken picture? No, but it's bright, sunny, she's smiling, and it's a really engaging email. So always look for imagery that is authentic and relevant and feels really true to what you're to put out there. So I just wanted to go through a few examples which I really liked. So Care Australia, they had a really good example of showing and not telling, right? They used simple graphics and numbers to do exactly what they did. So they assisted more than 2.1 million people across 28 countries and responded to 13 emergencies around the world. Great. It gives you context to the extent of what they do. It gives you an appreciation of what they do. Now, you have this layout on the right here as well, where you've got this size information. Is it groundbreaking in terms of the layout? No, but it's functional, it's great, it's bright, and it draws you in with the imagery. So another email I built for Help for Heroes. So in terms of the layout, I thought this was a great way that we showed how far your donation could go. So this is an example of showing and not telling as well. You could tell people to give you money, of course, but we found a way of doing it where that £17 can fund 2.5 hours of sporting activity, such as sitting volleyball, to help a veteran improve their mental and physical health and well-being. It's much more tangible. So rather than saying to someone, hey, give us £17 to support wounded veterans and their families, you are really getting into the nitty-gritty of how exactly you can do that. Movember has some great emails. I thought this was an excellent example that shows context and shows the depth of the things that they do thanks to donors. So this was the timeline of how a life-changing drug met FDA approval. So they could have just said that in text, oh, this drug met FDA approval. That actually showed a timeline. So I think this provides context as to the amount of work and time that goes into doing something like this. It couldn't be into legends like you, which you can see in the underlined text. You'll see a common thread across a lot of good charity emails, which is that the donor or the supporter is always the hero. So if you are marketing the third sector, you always have to express how you're unable to do your work without the supporter's help, because it's true. So make sure you're using wording like, thanks to you, or people like you helped us do this, or your donations meant that we could do this. Before I joined Help for Heroes, there was a lot of, we did this and we did that. And yeah, I mean, that's true. But ultimately, we as a charity couldn't have done it without the supporters. So really important to remember. Of course, optimize your design as well. So you have to make use of any opportunity to ask effectively. Emails you don't have a lot of real estate. One example in which we did this was that at the very beginning, we didn't have this donate now button at the top right corner. I think it was a space where it was a bit of arbitrary bit of text. So once we started putting that button in there, it became one of our top click links. So we were enabling people to get to the donate page much faster. And listen, I don't really care if nobody reads the email as long as they're donating. That should be the end goal. Some content and design test ideas that we ran certainly were things like button colors, content arrangement. A support story as a hero story going to gain more traction than a fishery story. And things like footer shortcuts versus no shortcuts. So our footer shortcuts, again, this isn't something that we had before I joined, and I was able to tweak this over time. So sure to provide helpful shortcuts at the bottom without overwhelming as well, because I have seen emails that have almost put forward too many links. So try and find that balance. But you can do this by looking at the most clicked links on the website, or you can funnel people to convert at key areas of the website. I think that's worth it. We also implemented a poll to gather feedback about the emails. Now, like any marketer, I was almost too close to the brand or the product. So having this poll at the bottom was so key to helping us really listen and understand what people were getting out of the emails and how we could improve them even more. So I would 100% encourage you to put a poll in your emails. This came into use especially with our monthly newsletter that we have for an indefinite amount of time, right? So it's really difficult because you have to look at things over a long period of time. So a poll really helps the anecdotal data to really bolster, your data gathering. And above all else, ask for consent. So marketing opt-in consent is a given at this point in time, but you also have to make sure that you are asking for the express consent of anybody you are featuring in your marketing. So beneficiaries or staff or just about anybody being featured. We came up with a really smooth workflow where we were able to get from somebody's consent to marketing pretty quickly. So that's, again, something to remember. Now, coming into cadence. So I'm sure a lot of us have seen this quote over and over again. It's often attributed to Albert Einstein, but I'm a bit skeptical of that. But anyway, insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. A lot of organizations, third sector or not, are very guilty of doing this. But the thing is, when I would propose anything new, I would often get stakeholders asking me, what if we annoy people? What if people unsubscribe? What if nobody donates? And I would always say, when in doubt, test, and test again. We can do tests. That's the beauty of digital marketing. But the big question, of course, that I would pose back to them was, if you don't ask, the answer was always no. if you never put out a cash appeal, if you never put out a volunteer recruitment, guess what? You're not going to get that funding and you're not going to get those volunteers. Now, there's a couple of ways that you can make sure that you are asking effectively. Tee your asks up. Send great content over a period of time and punctuate. So you can do this by building goodwill over time, by doing best practices. You can send relevant and useful content. You can do things like keeping a close eye on your data, and because it will tell you your subscribers are reacting, and you can always test before rolling out a brand new schedule, of course. And then when you've done all that, then you can hit people hard with an ask. It's not that hard, right? Litmus came out with a really great blog post which actually touches on this exact thing, which is, are you investing in or spending your email subscribers' trust? So they brought about the concept of a trust bank. When you are doing things like practicing great email best practice, then you're investing in a trust bank. And when you mess up, make a mistake, and do things that aren't so great, you are spending it. So I'd say spend a lot of your time investing in the trust bank and spend it correctly with an ask. So an example of a content plan, I would say, before an ask is things like putting a load of great content before and then punctuating, like say. So one could staff stories, day in the life of stories. It gives your subscriber an appreciation for the charity's role. They might not really understand exactly what it is charity does. I think people didn't really understand that we had health professionals directly work with the veterans. We had maybe have a fundraiser story, so show how easy it is to support, have that social proof. So somebody can say, hey, this person is doing it, why can't I? It looks like a lot of fun. And week 3, you can, go in really deep with the beneficiary stories, remind people why the charity is important, from the point of view of the beneficiary. Finally, on week 4, hit them hard with something like a cash appeal, a recruitment drive, or a product launch. But make sure that you're not asking too many things at once. Make sure you are doing a singular ask. All right, so here we are getting into the sexy stuff, data management. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of this abbreviation, GDPR, certainly in the UK and EU. For the third sector, GDPR works slightly differently. So first part is fairly straightforward. Direct marketing is the sending or directing of any advertising or marketing material to particular individuals. Right, yeah, I get it. Advertising or marketing material includes any material which promotes the aims and objectives of the organization. Oh, slightly tricky. Is sufficiently broad and vague enough that it could pretty much cover absolutely anything that we would put out. So our emails had to be carefully segmented because a lot of our content was considered advertising or marketing material. So for example, we're putting out a nurture journey and we wanted to win people back. We had to make sure that we were segmenting people by, or if we were stewarding through a fundraising journey, of course, we had to make sure that we were segmenting people by the consent, because we couldn't show certain people certain things because it was considered advertising or marketing material, like beneficiary story. So really important to consider this. You also need to ask yourself, how is data flowing around your tech stack? So ask yourself this: if you can do it off the top of your head, like a rough sketch, maybe just like a quick description, then great, you're in a really good position. But if you can't really honestly think of how data is flowing around your tech stack, you need to work it out with flowchart. Why? Coming back to my point before on GDPR, you need to know what consent data is stored and where, so you can do that segmentation and you know exactly who has which consent data and what. So understand exactly what data you can work with as well. That's a great idea. It's also easier to troubleshoot and spot flaws in the system. So say, for example, if you were to have a data breach, knock on wood, it becomes a lot easier to spot those flaws in your system if you have your tech stack and the data flow mapped out. So how can you do this? You can work with your IT team to map this out. Software like Microsoft Visio or Lucidchart, there are a number of great flowchart software out there. And on this last point, I cannot stress this enough. be transparent. I've been in so many situations where, transparency could really help. So create easily accessible documentation, like how the data is flowing around your tech stack. So even if people don't refer to it right now, it's something that they can look at later because it will come in use. Okay, so here's my big idea, and I'm putting it forward as my big idea because I've yet to come across an organization that's done this well. Shout out, if you are already doing this well, please let me know. But my idea is data guardians, and this is a much cooler name than anything else I could think of. So basically, this is different to a data protection team, right? They usually deal with the technicalities or the logistics of data protection. This is completely different. This, I believe, should be a panel of stakeholders that agree upon important data policies. So they agree on, how long you should hold on to, for example, employee data for, things like that. Consult on infrastructure changes may affect flow of data. So if IT are, looking at, making some changes to the tech stack, data guardians can be brought in and consult on, well, that actually affects us. We need to get a heads up on that, or we need to know when is the best time for us to do that. And decide on how to deal with any data related issues. For example, if a data breach happens, knock on wood again, marketing and PR probably need to know what's the best way to communicate. Now, 2 big caveats. Don't just include executive level employees in this in the data guardians. We need to include people who work with data on a day-to-day basis. So yes, your digital marketers, your perhaps the people who work in volunteering that work with volunteer data all the time. And of course, don't just include employees in IT as well. This really needs to include a range of people throughout the organization. So getting into automation is my favorite bit about email. In the private sector, we are used to hearing the term nurture journeys, but the third sector, it becomes much more about stewardship journeys because we steward people through actions or desired actions. Customer pathways usually look like this in the private sector from my experience. Obviously, it can get more complicated than this. This is very simplified. So you get a prospect, become a customer, they might lapse, they might go back to being a customer, or they might go back to being a prospect because they've been lapsed for so long. It's slightly more complicated in the third sector. From my experience, you have the prospect who could then go on to become a fundraiser, a volunteer, a donor, a community partner. You had a charity shop to make things even more complicated as well. And then you have the added complication of beneficiaries could easily sit in any one of these audiences as well. To be really mindful that we were communicating things that would potentially, not annoy a beneficiary. So start with the non-negotiables, right? Because it can get complicated very quickly. The 2 non-negotiables for third sector, I believe, are welcome and thank you. So as always, you need to welcome brand new supporters. You need to educate and inspire them right off the bat. You need to remind them of what the charity is all about. And you also need to manage expectations. So if you're looking to send them an email newsletter once a month, just tell them that right off the bat. You also need to thank them. So going back to at the beginning of this presentation when I was talking about the lack of mutual exchange, the least you could do is thank someone when they do something nice for you, like dating. So you do need to think whether it's for participating in an event or, volunteering or donating £25,000 or, £2.50. It makes donors feel appreciated and part of something bigger. What goes into a third sector onboarding program? We came across a really nice formula, and this was so useful whenever we got stuck. So what, the why, and the how. So the what is your mission statement and purpose, and what expectations are you setting? Really easy. The why is more of the accidental stuff. Why do you do it? What are some consequences of the organization's existence? Like, why are you here? This is stuff that you need to communicate in this step. And the how is probably the most important part of the onboarding process. You can signpost them all the ways to support the organization. And it's incredibly useful to triage subscribers right up front and funnel them to the right place. Because at the end of the day, somebody looking to volunteer is very different to somebody who just wants to run a marathon, just a marathon. And you can add more as you go on. So you can have your good luck automations. You can retain people, or you can win them back. So all of these are, I would say, nice to have, but I think the non-negotiables are very much the welcome and the thank you. And finally, this is the biggest question above all questions, which is, please ask yourself, are your emails in the best interests of the cause? It's really easy to try and do everything you can and, do your absolute best, make sure that emails are as cool as possible. But ultimately, are the emails functional? Are they doing what they need to do? And are they in the best interest of your beneficiaries? This is the most important thing. So yes, thank you so much. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for your time. I hope that was very helpful.
Yeah, that was great. That was more than helpful. That was brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's interesting. I liked what that description you said up front I found quite interesting, because whenever I've worked with charity clients or third sector clients, I always have to put a little note right in front of me that says, remember, they're not customers, they're supporters, they're, donors, but the other thing is they could also be people, users is probably the wrong word, but people who are relying on the services that the charity is, there to help. So
Absolutely.
how do you, how do you keep from getting those two things crossed?
So the way we did it was we had separate accounts to talk to the supporters versus talk to the beneficiaries, because we needed to make sure that you're absolutely right. We needed to talk to these people separately, and the way the consent sat was completely different as well, because with the beneficiaries there was need to know information they needed to have through email, things like any events that any sessions or workshops that would really help them, versus things that supporters would get, which was just updates about upcoming fundraising events. But it would get complicated. We needed to talk to that cross section of a beneficiary who was also a supporter. That's when it can get really untidy. So it's important to make sure your data management is as clean and tidy as possible.
Well, and that gets into an interesting GDPR problem, because obviously, depending on what charity you're working for, the beneficiary database, that could be considered highly personal data, whereas the marketing data is less personal, or requires less of a standard legally. And so you couldn't add a flag in the marketing database, or maybe you could, that said, oh, this is also a beneficiary. So, I guess just how did you manage that?
So from our point of view, it was a lot safer for us to have a flag that said whether someone was a beneficiary or not in our marketing database, only so that we knew to exclude them from certain things. But this is why I think, that the idea of having data items is so key, because, we really needed to bring in the team that dealt with the beneficiaries to be able to advise us on things around how can we go about this in a sensible way. So it's something I fully encourage people to do. And like I say, if your organization is already doing it well, please let me know, because I've yet to see it.
Yeah, it's a great idea. It's a great idea. And actually, I might pick that up with you offline. That could be something that maybe the DMA wants to get involved in. One of the comments that came through during your presentation, which I also picked up on this, when you were talking about the email design with the big red, donate now button. And you said, I don't really care if somebody reads it as long as they donate. I think it's a challenge for a lot of email marketers, and I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this. I worked with a commercial company that realized that, they spent hours putting together this amazing weekly newsletter, and they were in the entertainment space. So they had a lot of great content, but the content had to be vetted by the content owners. And it was quite a
Yeah.
process. And what they realized is that most people just opened the email and clicked on the top button to go book something. And, and they were kind of crushed by that. They'd, all their hard work was just sort of, oh, they don't really care. They don't ever read it. So how do you deal with that when you're talking to maybe a copywriter or somebody younger in the team that needs to kind of be less precious?
Well, it's like my question at the end of the presentation, right? Are your emails really working to serve the charity in the best way possible? Because you're just, at the end of the day, you're working to serve the beneficiaries. That is your role in the charity, and I think it's really important for people to remember that. But for time and resource sake, I've come from a background where I haven't had loads of time and resource to work with. So I'm very used to putting out things like, all right, let's put out an email poll. Let's look at how people are reacting to data so I can use my time in the most efficient way possible. And that's how we knew that the button up top was a good move for us. So like I say, I don't care if people don't read through the entire emails, say they're reading, but it helps me as well.
Gotcha. Well, Naj, thank you very much. This has been a brilliant presentation. I've really enjoyed that. Thanks for coming on today. And folks, again, if you haven't seen Naj's version of Video Killed the Radio Star, you have not lived. That is all. Right. So in about 15 minutes, no, in about 10 minutes, actually, we're going to hear from our headline sponsor, or our title sponsor again. This time we've got Bala and Tejas talking about growth in 2021. Marketing leaders share their vision on the future of email. And they asked some global marketing leaders for a roadmap for their organizations of and growth plans for 2021. And they're gonna share those insights with us. So pop back in about 10 minutes and we'll get those insights. And until then, enjoy yourself.